Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. It's Shirley with Spirit of Matter. And I want to talk about the fluid. The moon is applying to oppose Neptune. It is a Saturn hour on a Mercury night, and Mercury is applying to Antares. So there is there's a lot of the element of the fluid. I already talked about many things arriving in this night that are both of very benevolent nature, but then there are also the attempts to block it, the attempts to bully, the attempts to simply take a person that just lives their lives and try to entangle them with those dynamics that are chaotic, that are, trying to, get them entangled and then frame them. You know what energies I'm talking about. And the moon is applying to Neptune with Rahu. And it is a Saturn time, and Saturn in Pisces. There is a lot of the element of the fluid. And Saturn in Pisces, with the approaching to Neptune and Rahu, it creates, there's a lot of emotions being purged. Okay, I talked about the fresh droplet of water in the vicinity of the very polluted water. People don't know if this is washing, if this is this, if this is that. But also you want to think about situations where a person is bullied. And people are not bullied over something, just like somebody's not sexually harassed over something, right? Nobody's bullied over something. And when we think about the societal habits that there is there to just take individuals and kind of like bully them really over nothing. It's a facet of society that is very dumbfuckery, and in most cases people either project something onto the person. It's nothing to do with that person. Alternatively, they it goes back to projecting on that person. Something has nothing to do with that person. Sometimes they can think a person is a snob, where a person just sees their bad vibes and stays away. Okay? Or sometimes they can, it's like, hey, I see that you don't really like me, I'm gonna go elsewhere. And it's like, oh, that person is a snob. No, they just saw that you don't really like them. And sometimes there's this projection, oh, that person must be coming from this family, from that family. Like, the fuck do you know? And it's that type of behavior is really, it's really over nothing. It's a part of cult behavior, unfortunately. People just gather into groups and harass people. Okay, it's dumbfuckery. It's part of the jail experiment where randomly people were divided into groups, and their belonging was based on other people's suffering, or targeting individuals who's like, this is so dumb, okay? And everybody knows it's dumb, but for some reason they're doing that. Something they can't, usually what you think, you're like, oh, I can't stand that about the person. Like, if it stands out for you, very likely what you think you can't stand about the person is not even a feature of that person. And if you invest that much energy into that, then the problem is probably not with that person, okay? Now, we have to understand that in the world, people that are just being, or people that just want to live their lives, are in many cases find themselves in those situations because it doesn't comply with perpetual war, and it doesn't comply with the grander plans. It doesn't comply with torturing fetus and eating children, and it doesn't comply with that. Okay, it's just not. It doesn't. It's just not. And not only that, when you tend to that, you say, okay, I see that this is a problem in the world. Then that stirs up a lot of things. And then the more that it stirs up a lot of things, more and more things uncover themselves. And you find that more and more people have been entangled with that. And that it tips people off over nothing. So the phenomena of bullying or harassing or ritual abuse, which is a form of ritual abuse, okay? There's always entangled with some type of money laundering, trafficking. They don't like this person not doing corruption. Or for people that want to get out of the people that were in corrupt situations and want to get out. They don't like that person not being in cahoots with that type of behavior. And so this sets people off. And then there is the element of the flood. The flood is coming to wash all of that fuckery away. And I've talked to people that have been bullied, like bullied, okay, that have had nobody talking to them and so on. And they, even if it happened in school, they remember that to their elderly lives. And usually those people will find a way to re-relate to society, and then they'll be loved. They'll be mingling with people. They'll be around people. There'll be this, there'll be that. And they'll be relatable. There'll be all kinds of, okay, that usually changes and transforms. Somebody has been a complete outcast can be quite popular. I actually saw an ex-post that talked about Aquarius archetype, and it said Aquarius archetype, they ruled by Saturn, they always feel like they're outsider. When you actually walk with an Aquarius archetype, they know everybody and everybody knows them. And I have to admit that this is something that I noticed. Yeah, I've seen Aquarian people talk about loneliness and stuff like that, and I'm like, but you've met with friends 3 times this week. So, when we're talking about the flood, we're talking about washing away all those situations. And so, usually what happens to those who did the bullying? I'm talking about the over nothing. I'm not talking about people that are being accused of reactive abuse when they have no place to go to because they are MK Ultra'd in therapy. Okay, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people just taking a person and harassing them in all kind of ways that are visible and invisible. Like, that's not going to give you national security, folks. Or global. And it's not because of what that person will do. Usually if you found yourself in a situation like that, you're pretty much like, what can you do, right? It's like, what can you do about it? Like, it's just like, that's the situation. You're like, okay, that's the situation. But then comes the flood. And the flood is that bifurcation from, if you think about tsunami wave, okay, the withdrawal of the water line and then with the flood. You think about when curses backfire. You see that person, they're like in this helpless situation, then they meet somebody. You know, I had a case where there was a Palestinian witch that she was working at the hotel, doing cleaning stuff, and we would talk when we would eat together and so on. Then years later, when I was in academia, I met her and she said, you know, I remember there was some curse placed on you. She wasn't asking for money, she wasn't nothing. She's like, I tended to that. They tried to curse you so that you wouldn't study, so that you wouldn't grow, so that you wouldn't. And I never asked her more information about that, but she was just very happy, genuinely very happy to see me. And she was also going to academia, and I was helping her to fill out some forms. So it's kind of like it's those things. Just one sudden day, something pops up. Where I had a case when I was in academia, and then I wasn't even knowing anything. One sudden day, a person came to me and said, you know, they're talking about you. I'm like, okay. Yeah, there's none of the things that they say about you is true. I saw it. I'm like, okay. Okay, and that's it. It just came to me. It's just like, none of these things are true. Yeah, I have no idea what they say. And I said, I'm going to save you for what they said, but none of these things are true. And, you know, that bubble is going to pop. And if you are in that situation, one of the things that this Neptune ingress or the Saturn-Neptune conjunction is going to bring is the bubble pop. Okay? So Neptune is about leaking, Saturn is incarnating something. So there's a bubble pop. And Saturn is also ruling Aquarius, so it can be about the community. A lodge. There's a bubble pop. Hey, those people do that. Think about the fact that so much of satanic ritual abuse has been just so in the faces of the public. Gigi Young has been talking about it in plain sight for years before we saw the picture of King Charles in red on red with horns and stuff. It's like, even if you're the most remote person like I was, to satanic ritual abuse, you see that and you cannot, okay, you're like, something is off. That's not the royal family pictures that we used to see. So, and even if that is framing of Charles, King Charles, notice that I said Charles. That is Pluto in Aquarius doing a good job. Even if that was framing him, definitely there's something going on around him that is incredibly satanic, right? So we're going to talk about a bubble pop. And for some of us, we have been in a reality. For example, when I was in academia, I had no idea people were talking about me behind my back. I wasn't even like, who knew me, right? Like, it was just another student in a pack of students. Like, why would they talk about me? And so For some of you that you might be in the situation where some bubble's gonna pop. Did you know that there was that ongoing conversation about you? You're like, no, doesn't matter. Well, did you know that they were trying to confiscate your papers, trying to get you locked up, trying to traffic you? It's like, that's incredible. Like, why would they spend so much time on a person? Like, that's just such a hard work over nothing. So for some of you, some bubble's gonna pop. Or somebody suddenly says something. I remember when I was learning aromatherapy, and then somebody said, the person that was teaching me suddenly like saying something that could be meaning as kind of like trip yourself over legally. And I'm like, what happened to them? Were they mind controlled? What happened to them? And they wanted me to be their TA. What's going on? They were driving me to the place. Okay, they were taking me to the classes. Because we lived in the same city. So there's just things that are like, sometimes we won't understand things. We're doing it for the cloud or what is going on. But there's just, sociological factors or anthropological factors that are dumbfounding. And a lot of that, the fluid is coming and is going to wash that away. So for some of you, and you know what, sometimes they do it years upon years because you're not paying attention to that. And again, I'm not talking about being accused of reactive abuse. There's a difference where somebody has been completely trying to ruin you, and then you had no places to support you, and then they get it back to sender, okay? Whether that's emails, whether that's this, whether that's that, and then you're considered the harassing person who you just try to live your life, and every time that something comes back, like, hey, I'm going to throw it at them so I won't become toxic to other people. Okay, I'm not talking about what people accuse of reactive abuse. None of that. But they try to get you to, again, go out of your way so that they can blame you in reactive abuse. Now, if Beta per se and Uranus have been the bodies upon bodies, then Neptune, Saturn is simply the fluid. There's a bubble pop. The fluid comes and washes away those things. And you want to think about the things that have been happening in your life, habits of people that you're not, especially if you're neurodivergent to some degree. So you might genuinely not be the type of person that understands the social interaction where people talk about people. Now, I'm an astrologer. I do readings of people, right? And the way you study natal charts, you do astrology of people, but there's a difference where I present a figure where the astrological chart is relevant to the political events. There's a complete difference with people talking about people. Especially if you don't succumb to, oh, I don't like what this leader does, they must be crazy. Especially if you don't succumb to that. Now, half Dutch, and I can say I watched more Tweede Kamer than Israeli Parliament. For sometimes just for that reason. It's not always that way, but definitely, yes, there were some mishaps, people, calling to assassinate the fellow member, then they have to stand up and talk with them for 11 hours. And let's just say the type of conversation, or maybe people, when I was doing mundane astrology, they were expecting me to get dirty with the way that I view charts. And it's just not my political culture, nor it is my ethics when I do astrology or mundane astrology. Okay, I can say something, haphazardly where I can express my opinion or something like that, but not. I'm just not into framing people. Okay? If there is a structural problem with satanic ritual abuse that coincides with Peter rings and snuff films, it's a structural problem. It doesn't matter which political party. If people find that they're tipped off because that they thought that they would be neglected when that is mentioned, then there is a bubble pop here. Well, when we talk about the fluid, is exactly those things. The bubble pops, and there's a washing away of all of those behaviors. And when I talk about astrological year 9, I'm not talking about Saturn, okay? Things come to be resolved. When I'm talking about particularly the Neptune-Saturn conjunction, it is about, hey, that you have been accusing that person for reactive abuse after they had no place to recover from your soul rape. So you have a bunch of emails. Look what this person did. Yes, that is testimony to the fact that your actions were creating dissociation, fragmentation, and downright mental disease within that person that wasn't there before, right? They didn't come to you waving and wagging and this and that, but there was something that he did with energy that had resulted in those behavior, which you call reactive abuse. It's a reaction to something. And the fact that they don't even have saved records of you kind of shows that they have let this go. They didn't bother to surveil and record you and keep it for years and years. You're the person that surveilled them, perhaps in means that are also intelligence affiliated, and now you come with a bunch of emails that were sent a century ago. And you've just exposed yourself that you have saved something and then followed that person that you claim reactive abuse of. Okay, there's a change in there's a bubble pop. Okay, if you were thinking, I'm going to frame that person, I'm going to rape them, they are not going to be able to get help, then they're going to be reactively abusing because they bifurcate between feeling shame, regretful for being in anger bursts and so on. I would say, see, this is a crazy person. Then I'm going to confiscate their wealth, put them into trafficking, and everything is going to go like a Swiss watch. Well, what happened with Swiss Bank? It exposed the people that money laundered through it. That was the exposure of the accounts when the Swiss Bank exposed the owners of Swiss accounts offshore. Bubble pop. That's the thing. It's a bubble pop. The more you try to frame a person, the bubble pops. Okay, for example, they tried to frame Peter R. de Vries so that he could be assassinated. He was assassinated in 2021. We're at the opening of 2025, and we're only beginning to unravel the fact that they were also thinking to kidnap the back then Prime Minister Rutte. So that wasn't Tahi, right? The way CIA agents come up and confess that you don't know if you shoot, you don't know if you're actually shooting or it's a drill. The way that MK Ultra's espionage is done is by raping people from the fetus, and then with torturing them and then raping them, particularly anally, to dissociate them for what we call crown chakra and root chakra, so that they would try to compensate with what we call greed, and that greed is manufactured, and they're more susceptible to mind control. So they assassinated the guy. He's dead. But did they manage to frame him the way they... Fuck. That's Neptune, Saturn. It doesn't mean the person was a saint. It means that the whole picture begins to unravel along the years. You can take a person down and you think, I got the framing right. How many women were framed as crazy whores when they killed themselves following a narcissistic relationship, which we now know was a relationship with the man that was in a global cult? Because they all act the same. That is to do with intelligence. How many times was Giselle examined by doctors who said, we don't know what she has? Perpetual rape when she is being drugged. And she wakes up, she has this Neptune, medical diseases he didn't know to diagnose. The bubble pops. Did you know that for hallux valgus is that toe with the big toe in the feet? Just a little swaying, okay? They didn't blame just your shoes. They say, oh, this person blames the circumstances. They always feel a victim. They always feel sorry for themselves, okay? I tended to my hallux valgus. I remember that I couldn't stand in the Templar orders in school for an hour as a child because of the structure of my feet, and nobody believed me because I was an athletic person. How is that blaming society for mine? I was actually not blaming society for my challenges. That's why I've been in so much misery. Fuck. Oh. So a part of it is, yes, what people think about people, and lack of information can derive, okay, for not being able to assess things when it comes to a moral standards. If you think that she is a whore, rather than that behavior somehow created with a lot of rape and torture, then you would say she needs to respect herself more, and then people will treat her well. But every time she goes along that line, another torture, another rape. And why? Something called MK Ultra. But if you think for that person, why was Peter vouching for Deming? Oh, it must be because he had some snuff film himself. Would you imagine that he actually chose the bigger battle, and that's the WHO, that could expose all of the filmography he could ever have, and being an MK33 Mason, which very likely he was, there would be films, okay? But he still spoke against this WHO, risking everything, because that Joris Demick was just a mole X in a global thing. Okay, so not knowing that is like, what the fuck, what the fuck, what the fuck? And this is, so we're all, none of us is exempt, which is another layer of information, another layer of information, another layer of intricacy that none of us is exempt from. And sometimes the fluid is just a part of that, okay? And so a part of that fluid and that bubble pop can be our preconceived notions, or something that's like, it's all that corrupt. It's corrupt all the way there. And that's going to wash away, okay, a lot of the things that you've been up until now dealing with. But that's also mutual. If you thought people are looking for bad things to happen to them, why do people make these choices? She's a whore, okay? Then, it's like people are trying to get you not to be the next person assassinated, because that's what that is used for. They torture this person. They don't want to be there. Now, when we talk about treason with the sextile to Beta per se, and the fact that they torture people